Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this CFO Connect panel. I'm the moderator today. I'm Lucile Cornet. I'm a partner at a VC firm called H Roads. We're a global VC fund active across the globe. I'm part of the European team sitting here in London and spending a lot of my time working with fintechs. Fortunate enough to sit on the board of Spendesk, and so I have been joining and supporting their CFO Connect initiatives for a few years now. I'm really delighted about today's session. I think we'll have a great panel, and I'm joined today by Ryan and Dan. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but really excited about the panel because I think we'll get to talk about the AI adoption, not only from their standpoint as CFOs, but also I think the interesting thing is they're both companies that have AI products themselves. And so it would be really interesting to hear it from both sides of the equation. Before I let Dan and Ryan introduce themselves, I also wanted to remind everyone we have this Q&A panel on the right. Feel free to use it to leave your questions, and I'll try to leave enough time at the end so we can tackle those. So feel free to add those during the chat. But let's get started. Dan, do you want to introduce yourselves in a few sentences?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Zhang, CFO at ClickUp. I oversee finance, accounting, legal, and HR. And I came through a FP&A track. I learned my craft at Amazon and Expedia. And for the last decade, I've been running finance at high growth SaaS companies, helping them scale through capital allocation, operational discipline, and getting ready for the public market. So I'm really excited to be here today and share how we're thinking about AI adoptions and the next chapter of the AI in finance.
And you're based in the Bay Area, right, Dan? So thanks for waking up early for us.
That's right.
Ryan?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Roccon, CFO at Zapier, where I lead a handful of functions, including finance, data, biz ops, channel, and pricing and packaging. I've been with the company for almost 7 years. I started with Zapier as their controller, one of their first finance hires. So I helped build many of the systems, processes, and teams across finance. And I officially stepped into the CFO role a few years ago. It's been an incredible journey full of growth and learning. Certainly kept me on my toes. For those of you who don't know Zapier well, we are an AI orchestration platform that connects over 8,000 applications, blending deterministic automation with agentic inference. We've been on this journey from a simple automation tool to now enabling enterprise companies to deploy AI agents across their workflows to fulfill this current mandate of AI transformation. So excited to be here.
Thank you both. And obviously very iconic companies, both Zapier and ClickUp. So really excited about this today. But let's dive right in. I think some of these AI discussions can be a bit theoretical. Both of you are really in the trenches. And so I thought maybe we could start by, day to day, what do you see as the main obstacles as a CFO that you can encounter when you're trying to measure really the ROI from AI initiatives, both in terms of the data segmentation, hidden cost, and other parameters?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So, you mentioned it there at the beginning. It starts with segmentation, and that really has to start with clean data collection, right? Uh, at Zapier, we segment both obviously internal usage and customer powered features. As you mentioned, we have a bunch of AI features within Zapier. But even beyond that, we segment by team, by user. And then from there, some of the ways in which we sort of measure the return is through subjective measures, right? So we'll start by polling teammates, asking them, how are you using these tools? What impact is it having? How much time and effort is it saving? From there, we'll go to something a little bit more objective. So for example, we look at engineers who are or aren't using a Copilot product. And then we segment across things like their Git activity, their PRs merged, their issues resolved, the things shipped, the cycle times. And again, this is where segmentation really gets important. We have to get very specific. We want to look at each part of the code review process. So is it the V1 writing, the refinement, the QA process? We really want to identify where that AI step is adding most value and encourage folks to focus their usage there while they continue to experiment. So it's really about sort of finding where the places are AI is proving most valuable versus least valuable, and again, encouraging usage there.
And I also think that the challenge isn't finding the AI tools. It is having too many AI tools. I think that we're finance professionals here. We've seen this movie before back in the ZIRP era, right? 5 years ago, it's at zero interest rates. A lot of companies, we over purchased the SaaS point solutions. And many of us are still a little bit hungover from that. And when our teams get excited by a single use case AI tools after a magical demo, my first question is always, does the platform player already have this or about to build it and offer it? A recent example is our customer success team. They were pitched by an AI tool for customer competitive insights. Magical demo. I asked the team to do the homework and see if any of the sales tech vendor already has this. It turns out that Gone already built this feature, just one toggle, same insights, and zero incremental spend, and even calculates, I think, the competitive win rates for without any of the reps needing to inputs of anything manually. And you're welcome, Gone. Feel free to send me a Slack or something. And ClickUp, we have lived this consolidation firsthand as the platform player in work software ourselves. So last year, I'll give you another example. We realized that we were paying for 5 different AI note takers and at ridiculous cost. And finance team, we flagged it. And then the engineering team, they built a native AI note taker in ClickUp. Right? Similarly, with another AI tool recently called Talk to Text, we started to see some creeping license costs from our employees, and our engineers built it in-house in a lightning speed. So now we're selling these AI tools to our customers with a very small incremental cost. The second thing that Lucile was mentioned earlier was another challenge is the hidden cost, because a shiny demo never show the tags of the onboarding a new vendor, right? The integration, the shadow IT, the change management, and so on. And we all know that in B2B, there's no such thing as a turnkey when you're deploying to hundreds of thousands of users. So for example, I think Ryan is probably the same thing, is we got startup pitching us like the EP agents, AR agents every single day. Looked great until we factor in the integration burden, right? So our team dug in and found some of the large vendors like Coupa, they have agentic EP on their roadmap, right? Which is lower cost or no cost, already compliant and already connected to your existing data. So I think the lesson here is ROI often comes from doubling down on the platform that can deliver a suite of the AI solutions, and especially the speed at which the SaaS vendors like Zapier and ClickUp were rolling out AI features in an unseen speed before, right? So the buyers, as buyers and CFOs ourselves, we should really take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Dan, around both being nimble enough to experiment and allow people to use best of class, but also not end up with a thousand tools in your stack. I think that's a very good point. And I'd love to switch to another topic that I see a lot on some of my boards, is how do you navigate the trade-offs between the ROI that comes from cost efficiency, which sometimes sounds like the most obvious, right? Like you were talking about, saving time on coding and, customer support. And that's usually the most tangible, as opposed to the improvements on the top line, which can be harder to get, but potentially way more meaningful.
I usually break the AI ROI into 3 buckets. Right? First is, I call this 1 to 10 automation. That's the classic time saving, right? Classic manual, repetitive task, eliminate some manual data entry time, for example, very straightforward. The second bucket, I call this 0 to 1 unlock, right? It's the things that were impossible before AI. And suddenly you can touch every user. You can scan every community comment, or you can follow up with every invoice at scale. This is a game-changing capability. And the third bucket, I call this kind of C to A quality boost. It's not about speed, it's more about raising the bar of the output quality from AI, right? Most of these use cases show up in synthesizing insights, right? Supporting decisions or storytelling. And here is a trap is, if we only measure AI by time saved, you will miss the real value from the bucket 2 and bucket 3, because they don't show up in hours, right? They show up in capabilities and qualities. But for those to matter, the business has to be ready, right? I always say that, think of AI as an elegant piece of Italian furniture, which apparently I'm very passionate about. If your house has no design theme, or the floor is covered in Legos, so both Ryan and I are parents, so we can resonate with that. that Italian furniture wouldn't suddenly make your house like amazing and shine, right? So same with AI. If your organization isn't clear on your priorities, the best AI tool won't change the trajectory of your business. So that's the next point I want to make is why AI ROI has to tie back to your strategic focus. So for most of the CFOs I know, it is one of the three, right? So top line growth, bottom line efficiency, or operational excellence. If the AI tool can move one of these three big rocks, it is going to be material. So take us, for example, top line growth is our number one priorities. I have these two AI use cases presented in front of me. One is AI helping reps, sales rep, to build their account plan in 30 minutes, in 30 minutes instead of it used to take 3 hours, right? It takes some prompting there. That is automation. That is time saved. And the second use case is the AI BDR, engaging the long tail of the small customers we've never touched before because the unit economics doesn't make sense. All right. So that is a 0 to 1 unlock, a whole new capability. I would say both are useful, but the second one is the multiplier, right? That's where I would put the resource behind. There are also things like, AI making slides for sales. That's cool, but not strategic. At the end of the day, I see the CFO role as we're holding the map, right? So we know which mountain we want to climb, and teams can really get distracted playing in the grass, chasing every shiny demo. So our job is to pull them back and point the mountain and say, hey, which AI use case can get us there faster?
Yeah, and beyond financial impact, I think where you raise a good point, Dan, is where, what's going to be differentiating for you as a business. And I think on the cost side, it's probably table stakes, but I think in a few years from now, you can imagine everyone will have it. And so it won't be a huge differentiator to use AI in your internal workflows, where I think on the other points, you can really generate
Absolutely.
information. How do you view things, Ryan, at Zapier?
Yeah, I love Dan's answer. It really is about creating a strategic advantage. And I love that framing of sort of a time, quality, capability perspective. And the reality is that when you're trying to evaluate this and evaluate the tools that can help you sort of solve these problems, the metrics and the ROI calculations have changed so dramatically in this new age of AI. And you see it showing up in the way that these product price and position themselves, right? So a lot of these AI companies today are talking about outcome-based pricing, things like AI resolution or price per AI lead routed. And again, to Dan's point, this makes a ton of sense. This is an easy ROI calculation for a lot of us. We can simply say, well, historically, it cost us X to solve a ticket with a human. With this new capability, it's actually much less at Y. And so those kind of calculations, those sort of cost savings opportunities or strategic advantage in the sense of a new capability or a higher quality outcome are pretty easy because you can do a one-to-one comparison. What were you getting before with that amount of time and dollars spent versus what are you getting in this new model? When you're trying to evaluate some of these new things that are sort of AI solutions that are in line with a larger problem set and maybe more in this strategic bucket or within a larger cost structure, much more difficult to compare one-to-one. But generally speaking, you can find a proxy for sort of each step of the function with some basic modeling. So by inserting this step, what sort of operational efficiency improvement are we making? What sort of risk mitigation can we quantify? What sort of quality improvement can we create? Sort of look at that sort of on a very isolated basis and be able to make that measurement again with a proxy model. The other sort of just like generic call out I would make here is the important expectation that when you're doing this modeling, trying to determine whether you should be putting your dollars behind this cost saving or the strategic initiative or XYZ, it's also important to remember that the models are changing very quickly. Costs are coming down very, very fast. In many cases, the winners will be the first to gain adoption and leverage of these tools ahead of time. So the initial investment in that model might show up and feel sort of steep, but there needs to be recognition that will pay off relatively quickly with this sort of expectation of improving model costs and technological advances. So,
Yeah, there's an advantage to adopting faster than the
yes.
rest. I'd love to switch to a slightly different topic and talk a little bit about the role of the CFO as an exec in the organization and the role in this AI transformation. I think there's also a lot of conversations around, between the top-down vision of we should adopt AI and the reality of the trenches. There's usually quite a gap. I'd love to hear, in your views, the role of the CFO to really communicate on that AI ROI that might be obvious for the board, might be obvious for maybe the execs, but maybe less in the organization? How do you think about the cadence, the type of forums to communicate, and how you've been approaching it in your companies?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I think as CFOs, we have to set the bar for what is expected and how that will flow through both top line growth and bottom line efficiency. I think one of the most important call outs here is that this sort of transformation can't happen through helpful nudges, but rather organizational mandates, right? Full culture shifts. At Zapier, one of the things that we talk about externally quite a bit is we're at near 100%. I think 98% was the latest number we shared. AI adoption within the company internally. And much of that starts with bottoms up adoption. So, like Dan mentioned, lots of tool sprawl early, getting folks access to things, finding that there's 5 note takers, and then having to consolidate over time. But the reality is oftentimes we will allow those 5 note takers to persist because, or to exist rather, because we want bottoms up adoption. We want folks to know that they can do their jobs differently and more effectively now in today's world. And we want them to sort of take advantage and lean into that. But you have to pair that with a top-down edict. You have to make it clear that this is a company initiative. So give them the tools to be successful as individuals, but make it very clear as a company, you care deeply about this and you have an expectation that everyone sort of consider how to do their job more effectively and efficiently with these new tools.
I really agree with that. I think that we need to spark the movement first, right? And then orchestrate the companies to kind of go pursue this AI initiatives in a more organized way. I would say in terms of communications, just like any organizational communication, when we talk about AI, we need to do that translation for the 3 different types of audiences. So the first one is for our employees, right? For the employees, I couldn't agree with Ryan more. The goal is really to encourage the adoptions and show the tangible wins. So we should probably speak in terms of, energy and building heroes. And I use the words like what used to take 30 minutes now take 30 seconds to get people excited. And we also celebrate stories of team members who got supercharged by AI, right? It is very like anecdotes and story driven. But for the leadership team, for our quarterly leadership QBRs, we need to elevate and translate that AI traction into a progress against, let's say, a functional OKR, right? The example I use as Italian furniture isn't going to suddenly change your house to be an amazing house, and show how that AI initiatives ladders up to the most important priorities of a certain business unit, right? For sales, engineering, or finance. So for example, if your sales OKR is to accelerate expansion in the existing customer, then highlight how an AI tool can, for example, mine the existing contact, finding new ones, and generate personalized outreach. Right. So if you find that AI solutions like this, it can directly move the needle on the sales objective. The third level of the communication is the board. Right. So I think we as a CFO, we cannot walk into the board meeting and celebrate the little AI agents that can do manual accruals. Right. In their eyes, like it doesn't matter. So what they care about is the long-term leverage. So we as the executive of the company, we need to frame the AI ROI in the language of the multi-year operating leverage game. So recently we reviewed a 3-year plan with the board. We showed how AI can enable us to reduce sales and marketing as a percentage of the revenue, R&D as a percentage of revenue, and support as a percentage of revenue that usually ties directly to our gross margin. So quick wins are not going to cut it in the boardroom. Horizon needs to be 2 to 3 years because this is the ultimate accountability of all of our AI investments.
Yeah, I love your point, Dan. And it makes me think, I heard someone say there's no AI strategy, there's just business strategy. Which I think is such a good point. Like it needs to participate. Like it's not a standalone, goal, right? It just obviously needs to reconcile with what you're trying to achieve as a company. I see a question from the chat from Kim, and I also had that as a point. I'd love to hear, who's responsible for AI in your companies. I think Ryan, you said 90% adoption. Is there one leader? Is it something distributed across every team? do you have this concept of AI influencers that I've heard in some companies? I'd love to, to understand a bit better who's in charge of that AI adoption.
Yeah, for us at Zapier, it's sort of there's multiple answers to this question. The first thing is that when we are hiring folks into the company, we actually have an AI competency framework that we are evaluating them against, and we are looking for folks that are at least adoptive of AI trends and transformation, but also transformative in many ways. So they're using AI to really unique and impactful ways. So it starts by making sure that the culture sort of reflects that expectation that the folks coming in and the folks here really understand the importance. Then when it comes to who actually owns it, it happens in two different ways. So first is every function within Zapier has an AI mandate for 2025 and 2026. To Dan's point, we look at each of those functions and we say, there are things you should be doing entirely differently. You should be rebuilding the way that you solve problems, routing leads, managing sales calls, creating sales briefs, support tickets. All of these things are just ripe for complete rebuild and overhaul. So we give that to sort of the department leader and say, this is your objective and your challenge to go solve. And expectation is that you're going to come back with not just the small onesie twosie sort of examples that Dan was mentioning before doesn't care about, but rather the big transformative sort of shifts. So we place that ownership on the department leads themselves. But beyond that, we do also have an AI sort of transformation officer at the company. And their role is to sort of play the quarterback who's making sure that all of those teams who have those specific mandates and initiatives that they've outlined for the next 6 months to a year, they're making progress, that they have the tools necessary, that they understand what success looks like. And they're sort of rolling those things back up and reporting out so we can all clearly see how the needle is being moved in every one of those departments. So yeah, it's sort of a shared ownership model, but we do have one person who's responsible for it at the end of the day. And that's oftentimes what we're seeing when we go to talk to other companies who are trying to do the same thing that Zapier's done externally. We're finding this sort of like AI automation lead or transformation lead, more common position that's showing up. If you looked on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot more of those titles nowadays because folks are recognizing that having that single threaded sort of DRI on this project is really, really critical.
Yeah, both having the bottom up team by team, but someone monitoring. What about you, Dan?
I would say Ryan and Zapier is doing, really what they're doing is really incredibly inspiring because they're one of the very first early ones adopting this model. And we joined the movement with a lot of like thought leadership that they publish. I hope more CFOs, finance leaders will too, because AI and finance really need us and leaders to show up. I'll just add one more point to what Ryan just said. Is CFOs, we have to be in the weeds for things like this. All right. So we need to light the brush fire first to create that groundswell experimentation inside of our own org, because people need to see a clear mandate from their business owner, right? It's great to have a centralized role of head of AI, head of transformation, but their day to day is still tied to what you think is the most important for the organization. If your message is like AI is not optional, like AI is required, that change the entire kind of mentality of the team, right? So on the operational cadence side, because you need to make sure that the message actually sticks, right? So every week we will highlight an AI use case from the team, right? Could be sales commission automation, procurement workflow, etc. And then now it feels like hundreds of flowers is booming, right? So like every bit gotta be intentional. You have representation of every single little team here. And then we share the best ones with engineering and sales, right? So some of them can actually get productized and be sold to the customer solution. It is a huge morale boost when your team realize that they're not just closing the books, they're actually shaping the future of the company. I think similarly to Zapier, that now you can, take Zapier as a product to the office of CFO and share with them, this is how you can transform your internal workflows. Right. So for them, this is something they're never going to taste before. And weekly cadence, right? Beating the drum, weekly AI use case submission, monthly, maybe some type of AI Pro awards, right? Quarterly AI hackathons. So those are the things that really keeps the momentum moving. And they all know, okay, this is not just like a one-time thing from the top.
Yeah, and I do think in terms of employer branding, it really helps, right? Because you see more and more, especially younger generations, those are skills they want to build anyhow. So if you can really be that employer that's going to help them get that, their experience and experiment and learn these tools, I think it makes you for, even more appealing place to work. Gregory asked a great question. I think, he's asking, how do you create 3-year strategy with such rapid change? I think it's such a good question. I think even sometimes yearly, it feels funny in the era of AI, where every week there's a new news about new models, new applications, and new tools. How do you balance that traditional, like, yearly or even multi-year cycle with the pace of innovation at the moment? Maybe Ryan to start with.
Yeah, sure. The first thing I'll say is you do your best. You do the best you can, because the reality is you're right. 3 years from now, things are going to look entirely different. So pretending that we know the future is a moot point. So, but what we do try to do. So the first thing is, yeah, we actually do 6-month planning cycles because we recognize that 1 year are too long. And even the 6-month, we find halfway through, we're going, oh, geez, we need to change it again. So there is just a recognition of that things are moving quickly. So whatever you set out into the future is likely going to change. With that being said, when we talk about our 3-year strategy, we actually have a 5-year plan that's sort of baked in that 3-year strategy. When we talk about it, though, we really talk more in general terms of what we think the future will look like, what we think sort of the ways in which folks will automate their work, the ways in which tools will work together, how determinism and inference will sort of be connected in this new technology. So we're really more talking about it in this like high level, how we envision the world to look, how Zapier fits into that world, and then sort of working backwards to the things that need to be true today that we feel much more confident and tangible, and sort of put those in that 6-month plan. But again, the reality is 6 months from now, when we do that process again, we will likely be changing a lot of the things that we thought the future looked like, as things shift. So you have to be adaptable and keep those cycles pretty tight and quick.
I think this is a very fun thinking exercise we do, right? I would say even without AI, if you're trying to project 3 years out, you're going to be, it's a probability game, right? So the magic word here is scenario, right? That's exactly why we do scenario modeling. But I think that with this game changing capability of AI, your bull case, right? Your up case is going to be even more upside. I see. And let's say that foundational model costs continue to drop. Let's say that a lot of AI capability becoming commoditized, right? Let's say that our coders can code not just 10x faster, 100x faster, right? So your bull case suddenly looks more like, a moonshot plan. And then your bear case, we also need to put on, our hat of prudent and conservative lens is probably going to be even more existential crisis. For example, let's say, what is a real bear case in 3 years from now? Right? As a SaaS company, let's say AI will reduce 80% of the seats, right? So what is our plan to neutralize that if that's the case? So in our case, because we build software tools that fundamentally solve a big pain points in the big companies, it's a workflow problem, right? It's a business communication problem. Those problems existed for hundreds of years in a large organization. They're not going to go away. People will be willing to pay for the right solutions to solve this problem. The solution might be built on AI or not, right? But all the pricing model, like all the pricing and packaging model, will take completely different approach, right? So that's what we need to think through in the bear case model. And I think that the truth is probably going to lie in between somewhere there. But it wouldn't help us to be, super paranoid all the time, or super optimistic with nothing, on the ground to support that. It is our job to think through the both bookends.
Yeah, and I like Ryan's point, which is like, agree on the building blocks, and then within each you can be agile enough to adapt. But the big goals should stay the same no matter what. I'm just curious in terms of that agility. Do you have some rules, for example, to avoid being tied into long-term contracts? Like, do you say, or to make sure you keep that agility? Like, do you say some, like, especially with these AI tools, like, would you say, like, we're not going to sign up to multi-year, or we're not going to commit to one LLM specifically? Like, I'd be curious if you have some, top of mind rules that you're following, especially to keep that ability to experiment and change.
But yeah, I can share. I wouldn't say there's any sort of like hard and fast rules that we have here. The reality is that we're going to sort of work towards whatever contract makes the most sense financially in the short term if we need a tool. And to be fair, even in most of those cases, depending on which tool you're talking about, the cost to actually cut a contract short is not that significant that I would stop a strategic sort of like change as a result. What I would say is Zapier internally, we are very much sort of, we try to center ourselves in a very model independent way. So our product that we offer and the way that we use our product internally is intended to be sort of agnostic to the model provider. So we work the same way with OpenAI as we do with Google, as with Grok, or any of these interesting foundational models, and all of the other applications that we connect to. So we try to maintain that sort of independence. And that gives us the flexibility to solve problems in a very unique way. And even when using something like AI by Zapier within our tool, you have that choice to sort of route it to those different models for, something that has deeper reasoning or has a lower cost structure. So yeah, we sort of apply that same principle internally. We want to keep some of that independence, but at the same time, we're certainly going to try to find the right tool for the job and not necessarily avoid or accept a long-term contract at this point.
Yeah, I want to share a simple framework that we use in terms of, AI budget decisions. I love frameworks, and this one is actually from the book called Scaling Innovation. So it looks at AI value creation across two different dimensions. One is autonomy, is how much the AI does without a human. Right. The second axis is attribution. This is how clearly you can tie the outcome back to AI. So if you put these two things together, you got basically full quadrant. Right. The first one is what we call the holy grail. This is high automation, high attribution, and things like full automation, like support agents. Right. So you can clearly tie the value you're getting from this tool to how much they're moving your KPI. Right. And collection, as an example, Ryan and I can tie a collection AR agent directly to the DSO, right, and collection time. But the catch is very, very few use cases are truly mature and in that quadrant yet. If you find a tool that's in the high autonomy, high attribution, I would say I'm willing to lock in the multi-year contract, right? Because you can clearly bake into your headcount planning, your future capacity planning, and probably have some protection in a commercial, so you can also benefit from, let's say, the foundational model reduction. Right. The second quadrant is actually, we see this a lot, is high autonomy, but low attribution, something like an invisible platform, right? So they're kind of just working in the background. I would say something like note taker, right? They're useful, but you can't clearly attribute to what kind of value this AI tool actually brings me. So for me, I wouldn't sign up for a multi-year contract, right? I will treat it as a platform investment. I'll benchmark it to, let's say, if I spend 10 million on headcount, I probably spend 0.1% of that headcount cost on a platform capability, right? But watch out because this cost can add up pretty quickly. So set up some guardrail, but you need to have that capability, right? I call this kind of risk management. And the third quadrant is the low autonomy, high attribution. That's the co-pilot. So this is really hard because you can't measure just the hours saved. This is where I will really keep my eyes open and look for like multi-vendors, because this is where the things shift really quickly, right? And the switch cost is really low. So I'll be very careful not to get locked in of the single vendors there. And the last one is the low autonomy, low attribution, but I wouldn't kill it very quickly because it's a sandbox. I have very, very small, I give a 5,000 shared credit card for our team to play with, the sandbox tool. So they can say what could be the next needle mover for the organization. So I think that with a framework like this, as a CFO, when you're trying to approve a budget, you can simply just ask a question. Hey guys, is this a holy grail or invisible platform or Copilot or sandbox? I can help you hold the horse, because everyone coming in front of you, they're like, this is game changing, this is exciting. And you'll be like, actually not, right? Let's hold your horse. And this is hype. And this, like, really think through the value, the accountability that we can get from the tools.
That's a great framework, Dan. I like the idea of having a common terminology also of how you talk about this tool. Maybe just saying quickly on the ROI, I see a lot of questions, I think, from folks about that. I think Jonathan in particular is asking, do you sometimes run A/B tests specifically to validate or invalidate the value add of a certain tool or a certain initiative?
I can start here. Yes. Short answer is yes. So for both internally and externally. So Zapier obviously launches a lot of AI products. So for example, we just recently launched our Copilot 2.0, which helps you build Zaps with natural language. And certainly we rolled it out with AB limited sort of rollouts over a few months to see the improvement in activation, improvement in sort of use case, upgrade rate, et cetera. And so the short answer for the external use case is very much so. Like it's really, really important to understand what sort of behavior shift you see from customers when you're launching these new AI features. Internally, sort of the answer is yes, but with a bit of a caveat, which is it really depends on the tool. So we don't so much as say group A, you get it, and group B, you do not. But naturally, what we find is there's sort of a self-selection of folks who want to use a tool versus folks who don't. And we can pay very close attention again to the behaviors of those individual employees and see what's happening. So a sales rep who is using our AI tool to automate, briefs and to generate briefs, let's see what their close rate is. Let's see what their cycle time is. Let's see how effective at driving higher ACVs they are. So we can take these and sort of create these organic alpha beta tests with the folks who are sort of like leveraging these tools most explicitly versus the folks who are not. And that can be used across almost any tool that's being adopted within your company.
Yeah, so using the AI adoption, the slowness of the process itself as an AI, as an A/B test. So that's a good one. Dan, any thoughts?
I would just want to add one dimension here is it depends on what you're measuring on your A/B test, right? So you can clearly measure the hours saved. So one group is taking, like 50% less time. Of course, that's ROI, but we also should look at quantities and the quality of the output with and without the AI tool. And I would just add one thing people usually not do is the employee satisfaction, right? You can measure the group with the AI tools to supercharge their work versus a group that they do not. And that's usually intangible benefits you get from launching the AI tool, right? So Lucia, you had a point earlier, a lot of young generation of the workers, they entering the company, they want company to give them the tool. So they don't need to do all this kind of manual, like soul crushing job, usually entry level people needs to do. So I think that employee satisfaction is a great leading indicator for if this AI tool going to be well adopted in your organization.
Yeah, such a good reminder. Like maybe cost saving, but also what's the customer NPS, customer experience, and what's the employee
And that
experience.
as well. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. There's a question from Victor. Which AI tools do you recommend? So specifically, probably in the finance function, any specific, I'm sure you use a lot, including your own products, but maybe any specific ones, Ryan and Dan, that you would recommend from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very biased. I'm gonna say the tools that we use the most is Zapier, and while biased, I will tell you it is very, very true. The thing that makes Zapier unique, obviously, is that we connect with this massive ecosystem of not only normal sort of applications, non-AI tools, but all of the prevailing AI tools. So if there's an AI tool out there that you think is interesting or you want to use, there's a very good probability that it connects with Zapier. And maybe as an example of why I find Zapier to be so important and effective as an AI tool is the way in which we sort of like create this citizen developer across our employees at Zapier. So one of my favorite use cases that we have, it's very basic, but I share it because it highlights what's possible when you sort of empower your employees to sort of take on this AI transformation themselves. And because when I've talked to dozens of CFOs who've asked the question, who've asked, show me the groundbreaking agents, show me the groundbreaking ways in which you do this new AI work, I usually respond with, sure, I'll show you that, but why don't I show you how to crawl or walk before I teach you how to run? So this use case is very simple, but we have 10 entities across the globe. We use a virtual mailbox. They scan PDFs for all the mail that comes in. And there was an accountant who was doing this. He was taking those scans, reading through them, determining what they were, typing it out, putting it in Slack, tagging the appropriate folks, doing this once a week and taking probably 2 hours to do this once a week for something that's like not a value add, to be fair, just the tax, audit notices, et cetera. So we use Zapier and Zapier AI to effectively do that whole process end to end. So now the mailboxes email it to a Google Drive folder. We use Zapier AI, which you can power with any model behind the scenes, but we're using OpenAI's model. You summarize the content, create a new title, save it as a PDF in the Google Drive folder, then store it in a Zapier table, and then share that Zapier table as a Slack DM in a digest once per week with everybody tagged. And the whole thing is happening just without any human interaction. So it's this idea of there's all these interesting sort of smaller AI tools that are coming out, but the reality is a lot of it can be done with existing tools today that you're already paying for by blending in these AI steps to just supercharge it and create some of that mapping or routing or exception handling. So I often find when we're trying to solve a problem internally and somebody asks me this question, what AI tool should we get to solve it? My very first answer is don't just use Zapier to fill in the blanks and use the AI tools that we've built. So that's my very biased answer.
Yeah, and it talks to the mindset of, as you say, citizen developer. Don't necessarily look for a new tool to buy, but maybe try to build the automation yourself. What about you, Dan? Any favorite use case at ClickUp?
I'm in a similar boat, right? Very biased to the internal use case, and take advantage of the very powerful platform we already built, like Zapier and ClickUp, right? For anything that's collaboration, workflow, things like close the book, annual audit, annual planning, right? Then we can all leverage our own product to realize that productivity lift. We built all kinds of agents. I'll share just one interesting one because I'm a really big fan of the framework, and I'll always believe in taking a step back and look at your capabilities. All right. So as leaders, we need to see which capabilities are the pillar for our team to drive amazing results. All right. For finance team, it's basically four things. Number one is transactional process, right? That's close the book. You make sure all the data is right. And then there's the expand finance knowledge, right? Are you kind of arming your finance team to constantly learn what is the newest thing out there? The third one is deepen the business partnership, right? It's collaborating with other teams. And the last one is elevate the front office communication. For each of the capability that we need to have an AI solution to make sure that our team is at the next level of the capability. So one example is expanding the finance knowledge. So we use ClickUp to build the IR agents that basically combines the external competitive insights with our internal data, right? So that we can arm everyone in finance with the institutional intelligence that used to be impossible without a dedicated IR function. And now that knowledge got democratized, right? So for business partnership, we use AI to run a dynamic scenario analysis I just mentioned that blends macro and micro signals all together far beyond what a static model can do. And then on the model side, we use Gemini, OpenAI, all for day-to-day use. And we also give vibe coding tools for every single employee in the company. Recently, my director of accounting vibe coded on Replit to drive the automation of the manual accrual, right? So that cutting down our time to close of OpEx from 5 days to 2 days. And then, like I mentioned at the very beginning, the platform players, right? The Pigment, the Numeric, the NetSuite, the Brex, and Ramp of the world. Every week, they're launching the new AI features. So have some trust in that innovation of the best vendors in the world and make sure that we're kind of keeping our eyes open and be innovative in kind of testing some new use cases there.
Yeah, and I like the point you made earlier about asking the roadmap before you jump to another tool or buying something else. Actually, think close to your current providers because they might well be working on that as well. That's very good. I'm going to ask an unfair question, Ryan and Dan, but something we spend a lot of time thinking about as investors. How do you think the finance function would look like, let's say, in 3 to 5 years, if the, assuming the AI world really bears fruit and these agentic workflows progress as much as we think they might, which functions might stay, which functions might grow in importance? What would be your bets, Ryan?
Yeah, that's not fair. We can't predict the future. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the obvious answer is wherever there's transactional work that's pretty well defined is where you're going to see the heaviest amount of automation and AI influence. So thinking through things like indirect tax, tax in general, just general ledger accounting, AR and AP, those functions have very specific guardrails. They follow specific processes, month-end close, et cetera. And those things, that's where we are investing a lot of our current attention and energy into automations and injecting AI to just short circuit and really collapse the timeline for these things. So I do expect that you'll see those functions again that are very repetitive, have well-defined rules, start becoming much more agentic in nature. Where I think you will likely see maybe an investment or at least a growth is in the more strategic areas like strategic finance. Now, I'll tell you where I've been experimenting on things like we use agents to create our budget versus actuals and sort of have a chat bot that you can access to talk to that. And we have sort of the commentary being populated by those things. But I will say of all the things we built, those are the ones that I find least reliable because when you have these large sort of number data set, that's where the models struggle a little bit more than very transactional sort of closing the books type work. And so this interpretation of like very complex data sets and seeing the insights and pulling on that thread and knowing what question to ask next, I think it will continue to get better. And at some point, certainly just as good a job as any strategic finance analyst. But for the next few years, I think that's probably where you'll see most growth in sort of current headcount, where the other areas, again, accounting, tax, some of those more transactional functions will likely be the biggest benefactor of some of the agentic workflows that we're looking at.
Yeah, so more time for insights and strategic planning. What about you, Zhang?
To Rand's point, I think it's very hard to predict the day to day, and I can't even predict what my son wants to eat tomorrow, and I refuse to eat tomorrow. I think it's very hard, but we can hit on the kind of the broad brush, right? Some of the themes for the future. The number one I see is in terms of org design of finance, right? So right now we have managers, finance manager, accounting managers, managing ICs. In the future, that I can see this trend of our IC managing a team of agents, right? So the human will play the role of orchestrating and refining and review the work of the agent workers. So that's one. And the second is in terms of finance team, usually I think over 80% of our cost is in the headcount and payroll. Right. So in the future that I see that the more cost will probably from the AI, either the tooling cost or the AI foundational model, just the token cost. Right. Because if half of the team's work is going to be done by AI, we better start to budget some of the room that it's not just all human headcount cost anymore. And then lastly, I just really want to emphasize this point is the happiness. I think in general, Ryan and I will see a much happier finance team 3 years from now, right? Because they don't need to do this kind of manual reconciliation, right? That's how we grow up in this career, and all this manual budget versus actual, that we can free up our employees to do something human do the best. That is create, plan, and connect, right, with other people. So I am like an optimist when it comes to how AI can change finance as a profession. I think that the future is pretty bright for especially people who are willing to, take the leap of faith.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point because you hear those headlines that are often very dramatic about AI taking people's jobs, and in practice, once it's first of all, it's not binary, right? Like it's usually they take parts of your job, but usually it's the part that no one likes, so that you can actually free up some of the things you wish you had more time doing, which exactly as we discussed, right? Like strategic thinking, or maybe even spending time with the company, talking to other teams and other verticals. I think we have only maybe a few minutes left, but maybe I thought I can add the last question. We talked a lot about the mindset, and I think I forgot if it was you, Ryan, or Dan, saying about someone in your senior team vibe coding, and I think it's such interesting to role model what you expect people to be doing in the organization. And I'd love to hear, like, when you think about hiring, how do you test in people this adaptability, this appetite? Everyone can say, sure, like, I'm keen to adopt AI. Are there any frameworks or any questions you use to really test that appetite and mindset?
Yeah, it's an actual interview question on what we call the bar raiser. So I have to meet every hire that is in my team, my direct line. I have to do a final interview as a bar raiser. And there's a standard question in there, which is effectively paraphrasing something like, tell us what AI tools you're using, what problems you're solving, and to what degree. And it's somewhat generic, but generally speaking, you'll get some insights. Somebody who says, I use ChatGPT to summarize documents versus somebody who's built a Python script to go do something really impactful across this big AI workflow, obviously are going to look very different. So you'll get a pretty good signal from that. Beyond that, what I often like to do is I like to ask if they were to join Zapier in the role that they're being hired for, just knowing what they know about the company and the problems we're facing, where would they love to just go in a certain AI sort of function or step in their upcoming work? And their ability to sort of reason through the things that are part of their job and where they have already started to recognize this opportunity really highlights how, if they're thinking in a way that sort of puts AI at the center and thinking strategically about, again, not just micro optimizations, but rather I could do my job in an entire different way. You'll see that answer very clearly if they have that question.
That's a great question. What about you, Dan?
For some of the operations and G&A roles, we know is going to be very heavy elements of AI adoption. We actually give them a case study, like a take-home homework. And we use a really big font on top saying, yes, you can use AI to do this homework. But you got to walk us through what prompt you use, right? And why you choose this model over another model, why you use this tool over another tool, so we can actually see the thinking process. Because like I said, the center of AI adoption is human. We want to see like how this person has think through the different steps to get to that final best answer that AI can help to get there. So we find this one is more, can be more tangible, because to Ryan's point, everyone says, oh, I use AI, I use ChatGPT every day. But in the work setup, it's that iteration, right? Your first question is going to suck, but how do you keep refining it, keep prompting it to make sure that the AI has all the right context to do the good job? So we find this one is like the real test to see who are the forward person and who are not.
Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time, but Ryan, Dan, thank you so much for today. I think it was a brilliant session and lots of insights and great framework. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. It's fun. Thanks, everyone.